good evening, wherever you may be, whatever the time is. I'm Mad Morti. Welcome back to the channel, to Flosstube Extra, what is it, number 9, number 10, I'm not sure which. But here we are, with the long awaited for, much promised, and finally delivered, Stitch With Me on the Chatelaine, where I talk about Norman the Gnome. Now, Norman the Gnome, where do we start? Well, first of all, let's start with the stitching. So I am working on the Poison Garden Mandala by Chatelaine Designs. I am working it on 28 count even weave in an antique sort of cream colourway. I felt that would best pop the colours. As always, caveat, if you are travel sick, you don't want to look at this too often, because this is my stand, there you go, wobbles really badly. We've managed to get the we've managed to get the camera mount pretty stable, so now all the wobble that you're going to see is actually the stand and my scroll frame. If I just sort of zoom out a bit, I'm using a Stitch Master floor stand. There's my knees. So we'll zoom back in, because I'm having to work on the paper pattern so that I can film, because I don't have multiple filming methods yet. One day. Okay, I have done a reasonable chunk. I think the last time we talked there was over 600 stitches in this central section, which was just these 1/1. They were fab to do, and now I'm going to start working with this well, they call it heather lilac, but that's pink. So working with the pink, carrying on working around the frame. And the nice thing about this stuff is it means I can work out and back. I haven't got to colour control or anything. So here we go. Oh, it's going to take some counting first. So before I start properly chatting, allow me to just, work out where my next stitch is going to fall. That should be just there. Got in the right place. Dog hair ready. Look at that. And I think it's going to start there. Yes, perfect. Right. Okay, so if you watched our last Flosstube, you will have heard me refer to this particular Stitch With Me as the story of Norman the Gnome, or how I almost got arrested at customs and didn't in Canada. Yeah, where do I begin? Right, okay. It all started back in 1997. Back in 1997, I joined a medieval reenactment society called Wolfshead Bowman. And I'm going to have to go back through the annals of history so that you fully understand what happened, because this happened in 1999, so it's only got to cover a 2-year span. But yeah, I have to explain how I wound up. Yeah, okay, right. So I joined Wolfshead Bowman. We were a medieval reenactment society. They still exist to this day if you are interested in looking them up online. Was a member of them until about 2017, I want to say, when we left and joined a different group. And one of the things that Wolfshead Bowman used to do was we always did sort of archery contests and medieval living history displays. Medieval reenactments more than living history. And we would do, in the summer for 10 days, a show in the middle of Sherwood Forest where we put on a display of Robin Hood. And we would do the whole sort of the Kevin Costner-esque kind of story, really. It's where I got my name from, so now you know why I'm called Morti, because the Sheriff's Witch in the Prince of Thieves was Mortiana, I believe. But that's how I got my name, shortened to Morti. Yes, that was the part I used to play, and nobody tell me that I was typecast, probably best not to talk too much about that. But anyway, I'm kind of nervous at this moment, actually. I need to find the front cover picture because I'm like, surely there's not. Surely not with the pink. Somebody please tell me no with the pink. Can't tell. The picture's not very sharp. Anyway, back to the plot. Digress. Side quest. Where were we? Right, Robin Hood. And we would do Robin Hood right in the middle of Sherwood Forest, right by the major oak, and locally to us, not far up the road, it turned out there was a lovely couple called Richard and Julie Rutherford Moore. And Richard expressed an interest. He turned up at one of our shows on one occasion and asked, you know, if whenever we were up in Sherwood, could he join in? And we were like, yeah, no problem. Now, there may be some of you out there who know who I mean when I say Richard Rutherford Moore. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah. Anybody who's a fan of the Sharp television series will be well acquainted with his work because he was the Napoleonics advisor to the TV crew and a friend of Bernard Cornwell, who wrote the books. And Richard was an expert on Napoleonic War to the extent where he would give guided tours of battlefields in Eastern Europe. That kind of level. And we had a couple of members who were huge fans of Sharp. They ended up going off and doing Napoleonics themselves as a result of meeting Richard. But yes, Richard joined in. And if you've watched Sharp, you'll have seen him on the TV series occasionally playing the role of Rifleman Moore. I don't have any pictures of him as Rifleman Moore, I'm afraid, but for your delight and delectation, here's a picture of him, which I have found in costume when we were doing the Robin Hood shows. As a blundering, he was right in his wheelhouse, I tell you. As he loved hamming it up, and he played a blundering Norman soldier, very much along the lines of the Robin of Sherwood series. So why am I telling you about Richard and Napoleonics? Well, we got quite friendly with Richard, so a few of us ended up sort of going round to his place. We even stayed overnight on a couple of occasions over the course of the next couple of years. And Richard enjoyed battles, full stop. He did have a house. I'm trying to remember where it was, Mansfield or somewhere like that. I don't know. He had this lovely cottage. This really, really lovely cottage. And they moved. They moved to another property, which actually had a decent sized garden. And when we went round there one day, he said, here, he said, come and have a look at this. And he took us out into his back garden. And there in his back garden, the garden was fully set up for a battle. So there were action men, for you Brits, for the Americans, G.I. Joes, all over the garden. He had put in bunkers and sniper nests, whatever they call them, you know, they were gun emplacements, you name it. He'd built up this amazing collection of figurines, of dolls that were dressed as you would expect G.I. Joe to be dressed with guns and what have you. And we're like, but what's going on, Richard? What? He's like, well, he said, I just had this idea, he said. And I can't do a Yorkshire accent, but he was Yorkshire, I think, if I remember rightly. Anyway, he said, I just had this idea, he said, and he said, I've got a few garden gnomes. And we looked around and there were these garden gnomes. And they were dressed in battle fatigues. They were dressed for fighting. So we're like, Richard, what are you doing? It's like, are you okay, Richard? You know, do we need to call help? He's like, no, he says, just a bit of fun. He said, when I'm not able to go out on the tours, he said, I do battle reenactments in the back garden, and he said, currently the gnomes are losing and the action men are winning. He said, and I can't help what's going on. He said, but they're having this fight. It's pretty certifiably crazy, but it was a bit of a hoot. We went out there and he gave us a guided tour, and he talked about, there's a bunker, he said, down there. He said the gnomes will be in that. And so we bent over and had a look and went, no, Richard, sorry to tell you this, mate, but there's no gnomes in that one. He went, he said it's been taken over overnight. I mean, it was funny if you were there, but I am getting to the point. Let me reassure you. So, and he said, even to the point, he said, where he'd gone away, no, he hadn't gone away. He'd wanted to see whether or not he really could throw one of his action men, G.I. Joes, out of a window with a parachute and let him float to the ground. So he'd run upstairs, chucked one out of his window, as you do, see if it would float to the ground. Wind caught it, and it sailed off into one of the neighbours' gardens. So he had to go round to the neighbour, knock on the door, said, hello, said, excuse me, said, but one of my action men has got away. Could I have him back? Neighbour was like, what on earth is going on? So took him out to the garden. There you go. He said, what are you doing? He said, well, why don't you come round and have a look? So he showed the neighbour the battlefield. And the neighbour thought, this is really funny. Right, okay, my next door neighbour's a complete crazy man. Whatever you want to do in your spare time, mate, not a problem. So that was fine. And then Richard went off to go and do a battlefield tour. And while he was away, the next door neighbour came round and shot a war film like a war correspondent for the news article with this whole thing on a camcorder, edited it, put it onto a VHS tape, popped it through Richard's door. When he got home, there's this VHS tape, and it's the Battle for Bosnomia. I'll put it across the bottom of the screen so you can see how it was spelled. Bosnomia. Obviously, recent wars at the time was Bosnia and Herzegovina and what went on over there. So we all thought this was hilarious in Wolfshead Bowman. And we talked about having the SBS, which you might know as a special boat squad, but we were going to have the special Barbie squad. I'm not entirely sure that Richard was particularly amused by that idea, but then one day when we went to stay, somebody, I think it might have been my brother at the time, thought, I know, one of our number was due to go off to Australia, and I was planning a trip to Canada. And it just so happened that our trips didn't coincide, but they were sort of like either side of the holidays. She was going quite early in the summer. I was going in September. And we would have an opportunity to swap gnomes, swap the gnome over to us. And so a gnome got stolen, Norman. And he disappeared. And Richard was not very happy because he thought, no, one of you lot's taken my gnome. So he was even less happy, as you can imagine, when he started getting postcards from different places that were photographs of Norman enjoying himself on Norman's holidays. Yeah. I mean, these gnomes, as you can see from this picture, I mean, it's not a very good picture. The picture I was going to show you at this point has disappeared. I found it, I got it out of a box, and it is gone. Editing Morti popping in here just to say, ignore all of that because I found it, as you've already seen. So clearly the gods don't really want me sharing this story with you, but hey, you're going to get it anyway. So anyway, so it turns my turn. So I'm like, right, okay, brilliant. I'm going to take him with me to Canada. My trip was not the most successful of trips in the first place, you know. My plane ended up with a broken fuel pump. So my flight out to Canada was delayed by 24 hours. Let me just cut that. Let me just finish the end here for a second and add a new thread. So as I say, the plane was delayed while they got a new fuel pump. The fuel pump had to come from the other side of Canada to where the plane was. The plane was in Halifax. Fuel pump was over somewhere like Albuquerque or what have you, Calgary, I think, over that side of the country. So they had to wait for the fuel pump to get delivered. At least I got a hotel stay overnight. But for safekeeping, now bear in mind, this was before 9/11, okay? And I was taking some cross stitch with me, as you do on plane journeys. So I had a rucksack with me that had, sorry about the wobble there. I had a rucksack with me that had my cross stitch kit in it, and wrapped in a tea towel in my rucksack. Next to the cross stitch kit went Norman, packed away very, very carefully for safekeeping. And then they made the announcement, oh yes, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, when we fly into Canada, we are going to have to stop in Halifax. You will all need to disembark to go through customs to get into Canada. And then you will need to reboard the plane. So everybody's a bit grumpy about this, but all of our luggage would stay on the plane. And off we got. Bring your bags through, please, ladies and gentlemen. So join the queue. We're wandering through and doing the usual thing with the scanner. Oh, excuse the cat. And shoes and socks off. I don't even know if we actually had to take our shoes off, actually. We didn't take our socks off, ignore that. I don't think we had to take our shoes off at that point. But the usual thing, put everything in a tray, send it through the scanner, go through, be scanned yourself, with a wave the one thing all over you to make sure if you've gone bleep, but I don't think I did. And I'm stood over by the other side of the scanner waiting for my bag to come through, and I'm sort of nonchalantly looking around me and people watching and not bothering. I hadn't really noticed that everything had come to a standstill. There were two scanners. One was still running the other side and one had gone to a standstill until I heard the dulcet tones of the female scanner operator say to one of her colleagues, "I'm telling you, that's a gun." And then her colleague goes, "It can't possibly be a gun," he said. "It's far too small. Look at the site. Look at what else is in the bag." He said, "Look, there's a pair of scissors over there." He said, "It's not a gun." She said, "I'm telling you, that is a gun." And at that point, I looked across to where the noise was coming from to see the scanner. And I just wish that it had been the days of cell phones, because you know jolly well I would have got my phone out of my pocket and snapped a quick shot of that screen. Because I could see on the screen my rucksack in X-ray form. And I knew it was my rucksack in X-ray form because there was a hoop and there was a pair of stalk scissors. In fact, this pair of stalk scissors, as plain as day, in the X-ray picture. And next to that stalk was the outline, the shadowy outline of Norman the Gnome. And strapped across Norman the Gnome's chest was a cast steel, whatever metal it was, die cast metal rifle that was no bigger than the pair of scissors. And I just stood there and was like, oh my God, I'm going to get arrested. They're going to have a go at me for... Oh, what? I just wanted the ground to open up and swallow me. So the bag got taken out of the... She said, you're going to have to stop that person. She said, get that person to empty their bag. We'll see whether or not it's a gun, but I'm telling you it's a gun. So they got it out of the scanner, pulled it to one side and said, whose rucksack is this, please? And I've put my hand up sheepishly. I was in my late 20s at this point. Very sheepishly put my hand up. Said, it's mine, sir, I'm afraid. Do you think you can come over here and empty your rucksack, please? I went, absolutely, certainly. I said, I know exactly what you're looking for. And I put my hand in and I pulled out this ceramic gnome wrapped in a tea towel. Carefully unwrapped it, set it down on the countertop, and the girl who had shouted to all the others, I'm telling you it's a gun, she went, I told you so, that's a gun. And it must have been her tea break, because she marched off, thoroughly pleased with herself. Meanwhile, I'm left stood there, feeling like a complete and utter idiot. So, wrapped it back up. We got back on the plane. I arrived back in Toronto and didn't get stopped because we didn't have to go through customs. We just sailed out. And that was that. I mean, even on the flight back, it never, ever got picked up by anybody coming back into the UK. They just weren't interested, you know, flying out. They just didn't, nobody picked it up. Nobody going out, nothing. It wasn't until we were stopped in Halifax that somebody spotted it. And it's these guys that identified my rucksack to me and pre-warned me of what was coming. I mean, it might not sound like a particularly funny story when I tell it now, but at the time, it was very definitely one of those I'm going to dine out on this for a while kind of stories. So there you have it. I hope you found that enjoying? I can't even speak. I hope you found that a slightly amusing little anecdote. Well, I attempt to find where my next stitch goes. I think it's there. Oop, just there. Is that right? Down one? Yep. Yeah. So that's Norman the Gnome. And oh well, I missed a bit actually. There was one particular bit, and just to prove, because you know they do say photos or it didn't happen. I took Norman with me to Niagara Falls. I can't remember who it was that actually took the photograph. I don't know whether or not it was my friend Karen or her husband at the time, or a passerby. But I asked them to take a photograph of Norman in front of Niagara Falls. And unfortunately I didn't quite get didn't quite understand the operation. And they managed to get me and the gnome. They must have thought I was crazy. And of course back then it was all film camera. So you didn't really know what your picture was going to come out like until you had it printed. So I had no idea that this photo was actually not going to be as good as I had hoped. I had big ideas about it being this little gnome in front of Niagara Falls. Instead, as you can see, it's me. Me holding a little gnome. And that photograph was sent off to Richard. He wasn't happy. He was so unhappy about the fact that his gnome had been stolen. But I think he probably appreciated it much later on down the line. I hope he did. Haven't seen him for years. And I hope he's keeping well, but yeah, so there you go. That's the story of Norman. There's not very many anecdotes like that in my life. I mean, did have a close encounter with the gun in South Africa. That was not much fun. Again, no photographs, unfortunately, but that was where we'd been out and stupid 20-somethings, you know, having too much to drink and somebody in the group driving, and then we find out someone in the group is carrying, and then we're about to be stopped by the police, so the gun gets thrown out. And yeah, I wouldn't say I led a hedonistic life, but I would say that poop. Let me unpick those. This is what happens when you get chatty. I have to unpick those because I've missed a stitch. So we rip it. Hopefully we haven't lost loads of video. Has to concentrate more. So yeah, so that was a narrow escape with the police in South Africa. And then there was a time in France where I was 16, visiting my French pen friend, and we went to see Les Courses des Vaches, which is basically the cow running before they do the what was it called, bullfights. And in the middle of was it Bordeaux? Bayonne. I think it was Bayonne. In the middle of Bayonne, they would run the cows. They would board up all the cafes and restaurants and bars, and you could still, if you climbed over the wooden bars that were built around the front of the shops, you could still get served. But there were loads of lads that would put themselves in a position to be potentially gored to death, you know, cheery people. And on the way out, my friend went, "Oh, you need to come through this way. Allons-y." Venez. And she took me through the bull ring. There was a cow lined up. We climbed through these bars on the way out. Actually climbed out of this area where we had been. The day before I'm due to fly back, I thought, I'm going to end up going back in a box at this rate, you know. My mother, I'm so sorry, Mum, you know. I expect my mother's going to watch this now. Mum, I'm really sorry you didn't know about this. But yeah, Virginie on the last day took me into Bayonne, and the cow running was going on, and when we went to leave, we climbed out through the bars between this gate, and I came face to face with a cow. It was about to be released into the pit. So yeah, sorry. Forgot to tell you about that one. Yeah. Yeah, we won't talk about that. It was fun. It was fun. It was frightening at the time, but funny nonetheless. I'm still not sure this is the right pink, you know. So, but basically, there you have it. That's the story of Norman the Gnome, plus a couple of other minor travel incidents that I've had. Could next time I might tell you about Cead, the missing cockatoo that I encountered. That might be interesting. Yeah. I think I didn't need to do those because I was going to do those on the outer ring when I get to it. But never mind. And where we're at 30 minutes. So I think 30 minutes is plenty long enough for a stitch with me. Don't really think there's an awful lot to talk about. I could talk about going to Canada itself, but you know, it's just Canada. Although it's not just Canada, because my friend Karen lives there, and that was who I was going to visit in the first place. So, and do some sightseeing, but I stayed at Karen's. And Karen, you will know as the amazing designer behind Textured Treasures. I just nodded. You're not going to see that. But hey, there you have it. I really am quite nervous about this pink that's going in. So I'm going to go away, see if I can find a close-up photograph. I know there's a couple of people out there that are stitching this, so I'm going to go and check what they've stitched just to make sure, reassure myself. And I will see you next time. Hang on. Oop. Especially as I'm coming out of shot. There we go. Anyway, see you next time. Bye-bye. Just a quick little add-on for everybody. Yeah, those of you that have been shouting at the screen for the entire thing that have already stitched this or are in the process of stitching this and who know that it's actually not that pink. Yeah, I've stitched the wrong colour. It shouldn't have been pink at all. The colour it should have been. Yeah. And how have we made this mistake? Well, we've made this mistake because we're blind as a bat. But let me show you. Here's the colour that I thought I needed to stitch with. See that? Then we come down here. Here's the colour that I should have been stitching with. And the difference, I don't know if you can see it. That is a little wand. This one here. Little wand with a round dot versus a little wand with a square dot. And I didn't realise there were two. Yeah, mental note to self, check the entire key before deciding that it's a particular colour. So I'm off to go and frog. Toodle blip everyone. Bye.